Hello dear learners, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will be talking about AOP concepts. Now, in our previous video, we had already spoken about what exactly is AOP or aspect-oriented programming, wherein we had learned that aspect-oriented programming is something that complements the existing object-oriented programming that we already know, and it helps in implementing the concept of high cohesion in the most appropriate way as expected. Also, AOP helps in modularizing our code and it helps in simplifying our code because it separates out the business logic from something which is called as aspects or cross-cutting concerns, which makes it simple for the developer to write and understand the code. We had seen various ways in which lot of different logic like transaction or connection pooling, they cross-cut our business logic and make our code complicated. AOP caters to all this and simplifies our code. Now, there are various concepts in AOP or also known as terminologies of AOP, that is aspect, join point, advice, point cut, target object, weaving, introduction and many more. Right? So in today's video, we will be focusing on these concepts and we will understand what exactly these concepts mean. In our next video, we will be talking about what exactly is advice and what are the different types of advice. We will also see examples on advice, so stay tuned for the next video also. Also, I would like to tell all my learners, please remember to see my whole video end to end because a lot of times there are so many important concepts that I discuss, small tips, small concepts that I discuss during the video, which you might miss if you don't see the video end to end. So it's a humble request to all my learners that please watch the video completely end to end so that you're not missing on those little diamonds as I call them. Right? So going ahead, let's talk about each and every concept that we are seeing here and understand what exactly they mean. So let's get started. So as I told earlier, there are a lot of AOP concepts or terminologies like aspect or join points or advice or point cut or introduction, target object, AOP proxy and weaving. These are a lot of concepts that AOP talks about and helps us in implementing the concept of high cohesion, which makes our code simple and modular. So let's see each of these concepts one by one and try to understand what they mean. The first one being aspect. Aspect is nothing but it's a functionality or a feature that cross-cuts. I have already told in my previous video that there are a lot of other modules that we implement or there are a lot of other functionalities that we implement in our code which are important to our code but they are not the business logic. Okay. Such cross-cutting concerns are nothing but aspect. Okay. So in addition to having the business logic in our code, aspect helps us in implementing this additional code. Like as you can see here in the example, logging, transaction management. Similarly, you even have security related functionalities which are implemented, which can also be counted inside aspect. Now, if aspects or if these concept of aspect or advice would have not brought into picture, unit testing our code would have become very difficult because in that case the whole code would have been written into the same class, everything would have been into one and it would have been very difficult to unit test each and every module separately. So here if you see this example, in this particular example business operation method has logging code also. As you can see, I'm saying logger.info and I'm writing business method called. Then I am also beginning a transaction here. I'm saying transaction.begin. Then I'm writing my whatever business logic that I'm supposed to of saving a particular bank record or anything, any sort of business operation that I have, I'll be performing that. Then I'll again call the transaction code to end this particular transaction. And then again my logging code might come up after this saying that the business method has ended, which is not there in this case, but then there's very much a possibility that we might have it. Correct. Now what is happening here is that the logging code, the transaction code and the business logic code, everything is dumped into the same method, which makes it very complicated. Okay. AOP or aspect basically helps us in separating out these cross-cutting concerns from the actual business logic. So in this particular business operation, we will only have code that does the business operation part. Okay, it will not talk about logging code, it will not talk about transaction code. So then how will these come? These will come through AOP and the various concepts like join point, point cuts. They will help us in adding up these codes. Like as you can see here, the logger code or the logging code, I want it here in this case only in the beginning of the method. Whereas transaction, I want it to be called both before the business logic and after the business logic, but after the logging code. So there is some sort of sequencing that we are following here, that first I want the logging code to be called, then I want the transaction code to be called, then I want my business code, and then again I want my transaction, right? So there is some sort of sequencing that we are following. This sequencing or this order of calling a particular set of code will be easily implemented with a concept called as join point. Okay, now join point helps you in determining what could be the various possible places where you can insert or where you can put your aspect code. Okay, so there could be various places like start of the method, end of the method, maybe both, like you saw in the earlier example. For transaction, I wanted the transaction code to be at both the places, at the beginning of the method also and at the end of the method also. So there could be a possibility that I want this particular code to be present at both the locations, the start of the method and the end of the method, which can be implemented with the help of join points. There could be also times when I want some set of code to execute whenever an exception occurs. So in that case, I would want a point where I want my aspect code to execute whenever an exception occurs. So I have the exception block for that. Similarly, there could be times when when the finally block runs in the whole exception handling part, I want a particular code to execute at that point. So in that case, I can even use the finally block. So these are some of the possible places where you can have it, even at the calling of the method. As you can see, the start of the method, you can go ahead and call that particular code. So as I said earlier, possible places where you can call a particular piece of aspect and you can make it execute is nothing but a join point. Okay, so as you can see here, such possible execution points in the application code for embedding aspects are called join points. Now again, understand, it is not necessary always that I might put a particular piece of aspect code at every point or every join point. That it is not necessary that I'll always have code at the beginning of the method or at the end of the method or maybe an exception block or finally block. It is up to the developer to decide at which particular point the developer wants to call a particular aspect code or not. So that is the developer's choice. So that's basically join point, possible places where you can have the execution of program happening or execution of aspect happening. Okay, now the next is advice. Advice is something that actually goes ahead and implements the aspect. Understand, aspect is more of a conceptual thing, or it's more of an abstract thing, okay, which defines what exact functionality we want, like transaction, security, logging, connection pooling. There could be various different functionalities that we talk about and we term them as cross-cutting concerns. But advice is actually that piece of code which is going to implement that concept or that aspect. So when I talk about logging, so the code which actually writes that logger.info statement, or if I talk about transaction, the actual line of code or the actual method of code which is talking about starting the transaction, ending the transaction, is nothing but advice. So advice, you can say, is basically a code that implements the aspect, and aspect is more of an abstract implementation of it. It talks more about the functionality rather than actually going ahead and implementing it. Advice is more concrete, aspect is more abstract. Now there could be different types of advices which you could use, before advice, after advice, and around advice. We will have a complete session on this next time, wherein we will talk about these different types of advices, and we'll also see an example of each type of advice that we are seeing. Okay, so stay tuned for that also. Going further, we will be talking about something called as point cut. Now there could be as we have seen in join point, there could be various places where I can insert my aspect code or insert my cross-cutting concern code, right? But in a particular class or in a particular piece of code, okay, the actual places where I have inserted or where I want to insert all those set of methods in which I want to implement my aspect code is nothing but a point cut. So join point again is more of abstract, which tells you all possible places where you can have it. Point cut is more concrete, which gives you an actual set of places where you have gone ahead and implemented the code of an aspect. So there's a little difference in both of them. Join points, all possible places where you can have it. Point cut, actual places where you have gone ahead and implemented it in your code. So maybe in your code you have only implemented it in the beginning of the method and maybe not at the end of the method, right? So point cut tells you that what places in all set of methods that you have you implemented a particular aspect code. And join point tells you that you can implement a particular aspect code during the method invocation or when the method gets called, right? So that's the difference between the two. Join point, as I said, is more abstract, point cut more concrete. Okay, going further, talking about target object. Target object is basically that piece of code on which we are implementing the aspect. Okay, or you can say the object which is being advised by one or more aspects. So that business logic code that we have to which we are applying the aspect is nothing but our target object. Okay, it is also known as advised object because we are implementing a lot of advices over it. We are implementing a lot of code before, after, or maybe both in that particular code. Okay, and since Spring AOP is implemented by using runtime proxies most of the times, it is also known as a proxied object. In case if you are not aware of what runtime proxies are, don't worry, we will be having a video on runtime proxies when we start talking about aspect J code and more on AOP code. Okay, going further, we have something called as an AOP proxy. This is basically an object which is created by AOP framework in order to implement all the aspect contracts. That is, which location the methods will be executed. So the advised method executions and from where it will be called, so on and so forth. Now in Spring, there are two types of AOP proxies which are available: a JDK dynamic proxy and a CGLib proxy. So I'll be doing a detailed video on what exactly is JDK dynamic proxy, what is CGLib proxy, how are they same and how are they different from each other. So don't forget to watch the video on the JDK dynamic proxy and CGLib proxy. Okay, so AOP proxy is nothing but a object that is being created by AOP framework, okay, to implement all these aspect related contracts. The contracts that we have defined, that a particular method should be called in the beginning or a particular aspect should be called at the end only. So all these contracts that we define, basically to implement that we have an AOP proxy. Okay, then we have weaving. Now weaving is a very important concept or a very interesting concept because it is basically the whole process that we're talking about here of inserting aspect at the appropriate locations in our code. So this whole process wherein I have one set of code that is the aspect, I have one set of code that is the business logic, and the whole merging of both of these, that at which location which aspect code will get called in the business logic, that's nothing but weaving. Again, we can have compile time weaving and we can also have runtime weaving depending upon what sort of your requirements are. Mostly in aspect J we have compile time weaving when we implement the whole AOP using aspect J, but if I'm using Spring AOP, it is most of the times runtime weaving. So as I said, with aspect J it is compile time weaving, with AOP or Spring AOP it is runtime weaving. Okay, we will definitely talk about the implementations of both compile time weaving and runtime weaving wherein it will become more clearer. Okay, and the last concept for this particular video, that is introduction. Now introduction is again a very interesting concept because it helps you in adding up additional logic or additional methods in your existing code to give it some additional behavior. Okay, so as you can see here, the process by which you can modify the structure of an object by introducing additional methods or fields to it. You can actually go ahead and tell your code to implement a particular interface and implement it. Okay, and it also helps you not only interface but also its implementation class. So there are various annotations through which you can do this. We will talk about introduction also in detail. So all these concepts that you are seeing here, we will go ahead and talk about each and every concept in further detail. We'll see examples of it and see how they are implemented. So this is like just an introduction of all these concepts. We will have future videos which will go ahead and talk about these concepts in more detail. So coming back to introduction, as I said, introduction is basically used for implementing those additional logic or additional methods in your code through an interface, a specific interface and its implementation class, and it helps you in adding up that additional functionality to your code. Like as you can see here in this example, you could use an introduction to make a bean implement an isModified interface to simplify caching. So every time the because this isModified interface is implemented, it will notify when the code is modified, with the help of which you can very easily then re-get the data from the database or whatever location that you're getting it, and hence simplifying your caching. Okay, so it will help in notifying us that the code is modified. So you can have this particular interface being implemented in your code and also its implementation class through a specific annotation known as declaring parents, which is used for implementing introduction concept. Okay, so that is all about introduction here, and also about the various AOP concepts that we have. In our next video, we will be talking about the various types of advices. We will understand what exactly the concept is, and we will see an example on it and see how it is implemented. So that is it for today. Please, if you like my content, like my videos, share my content with your friends who would like to learn Spring. Also, please subscribe to my channel so that you keep getting notification for my videos every time they come. I regularly upload videos on the various concepts of Spring. Also, again, a humble request to all my learners, please watch my videos end to end so that you're not missing on any concept or the smallest of topics, and you gain the maximum knowledge out of my videos. That is it for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.